Benjamin Buchanan, the CEO of Smarter Building Technologies Alliance. We are a systems integrator, and we are approaching the market here with advanced controls in mind, and IoT and intelligent buildings, realizing that there's been a shift lately that technology has taken over the LED industry, right? Or the lighting industry, which, now we almost call it the LED industry. And it needs to, we all need to pause, and we may need to change our business models. The technology is finding its way deeper into the fixture, deeper into products that never had technology before. They were always analog. And that actually creates some challenges for us, because the way that our industry has been set up for the last 100 years hasn't really been enabled for technology. So we believe we have a nice model that's going to be able to integrate technology into buildings, and so hopefully we can talk about that today, and about what Signify is doing to enable that as well, and how we can all work together to change the industry.
So what's your background?
Well, so my background is, I started out as a contractor and retrofit, millions and millions of square feet for the first 10 years of my career. Then got into the product side, and started by working in just the basic commodity lighting space, selling fluorescent components and all the different components. We would represent sensors and everything, Bill Brown sales, if you guys know it. And then made my way into sensors. We represented WattStopper, and then I ended up opening an agency that represented a lot of different controls lines, and then was working to represent Daintree, and they said, rather than represent us, I think you need to come over. So spent 6 years at Daintree, starting that company with them and building it up, and then eventually they were acquired by GE, and now Current. And this, it made a transition for me to say, I've seen enough sides of this industry. I think it's time that I go and work with these folks to help them get to market. I can probably do more good on the outside than on the inside.
So I've been in the business for 32 years, not 45. My experience has ranged from the engineering side, where I did machine controls actually when I first started in the industry. Moved into the marketing. I did a lot of work with control systems and drivers. And then I took over, became head of sales, and then actually ran over the business that was the largest ESCO in the US for quite some time. Did that, and wanted to move to, I think, the more exciting part of the industry right now. I mean, really get to see a big change. I went from where we were relamping stores with fluorescent lamps, TAs all the time. Now we're into a whole new level of actually getting into and changing how these stores actually work, or buildings in general. So that's the exciting part. I think we're getting into an area that is much more interesting, much more and much more fulfilling for the customers as well too. Mm-hmm.
So I think, Benjamin, every time I talk to you, I just feel like I'm learning so much drinking from a fire hydrant. So I think that I really want to use the opportunity for you to share with all our audience here in the room today, the thing that you see and hear. So I want to start with asking you a question tell us a little bit about SBT Alliance, because I'm not sure how many of you out there know of this company. So give us a really quick, hey, this is what your company does. And then we can talk a little bit more about the connected lighting industry today, and based on what you see. And then later on, we can get a little more in terms of the customer journey. Put us in your shoes as you walk with your customer, deploy the solution, maintain and support that.
Got it. Okay. Well, and thank you for that opportunity. We do appreciate to be able to plug ourselves a little bit. So what the challenges that we had when I was on the actual controls manufacturer side was plain and simple. How do we get this to market? It doesn't fit in the same model. It's not a fluorescent light. It's not an occupancy sensor. It's all sorts of stuff in between. And I think a lot of the controls manufacturers ended up defaulting to selling it themselves. It was very challenging to actually inspire the channel to go out and sell these IoT solutions, these software-based solutions, because that wasn't in their skill set. It wasn't in their paradigm. There was a very specific way that projects got sold, and this wasn't how. So we figured, let's lead by example. And so hired salespeople to go out and sell projects. And that was one thing, because that was early on, and there were there were devices that were really challenging to work with. They were all spread out all over the building, wireless technologies everywhere. Everything was beta or early on, and so there were bugs flying all over the place. It's gotten cleaned up and it's gotten refined, and Bluetooth and Zigbee have gotten to a point where we're now seeing a real application, and people are buying into it. So now we realize, okay, this is actually happening. This technology is getting cost effective. We can integrate this into fixtures now, but who's going to do that? And I think there's a lot of folks in the industry that have been burned in the early days of trying to integrate controls into fixtures, and who takes responsibility, who actually commissions them, who owns them, is there support, what does the building look like afterwards, all those types of things. And there's some folks joining the industry now, or coming out like us, that are saying, we want to play in the middle. We want to enable this technology transfer and get it into the building. So that's what we've done. Realizing that this isn't about just installing controls in a building, it has to be integrated into a fixture at this stage. And in order to do that, there needs to be a middleman that paves the way for the fixture industry, for the controls industry to meet in the middle and to get deployed. And somebody needs to own it. Somebody needs to take the control of the design and of the implementation, the project management, and then support it. So we've created a business that touches each one of those areas, that works with the LED industry, that works with the controls industry, and are experts in software and support and service. And also then this next tier of say, well, where can we go with it? Can we start to leverage these networks? Can we participate in writing applications that actually take the IoT to where it's supposed to be, where we believe it can be, and to leverage the data and the controls and do things that aren't just cost savings, which is fine. We want to save costs. In fact, that's what gets it in the building. But let's actually start making money. Let's make revenue generating outcomes from these IoT networks. So that's what SBT is. We're an integrator in the market, and we're excited to be here. I think we have a unique model, and we want to work with everyone and help everyone get into a building.
Want anything to add?
No, I think Benjamin has summed it up pretty well. I think we've been around the industry so much that we know where the gaps are. We're experienced in a lot of different types of major companies, and I think we're looking at pretty much the leaders as being partners. Of course, Signify being one of those leaders. We believe that they're in the right path. We want to be able to work together with you and some other fixture makers and incorporate your technology into those systems and deploy them. We believe you've got the right solutions, and we want to be able to maximize that.
Speaking of leader, a plug for Signify as well, so we have this so-called digital drivers as well as the analog driver, which obviously we recognize that not one size fits all. But having said that, I think the one thing I am a very big believer in is really the fact that everything is now connected, right? So when you think about any sort of retrofit or even new install, it kind of behoove you not to consider laying down the digital foundation. Having the digital foundation give you the flexibility to do something that down the road you can able to extract information. Whereas if you're trying to save money by go with a cheaper solution, these light fixtures will be there for 5, 10, 15 years. You don't want to go into another situation, now we have to replace all of the LEDs because we can't do things that we should have done a couple years ago or 3 years ago. So we developed this digital driver, also known as Xitanium SR, which stands for sensor ready. So sensor ready is a kind of like an information bridge between the driver and also the control system. So the driver then have the built-in memory bank, power metering, so you have all that capability at your fingertip. So you have this machine as a sensor of human experience, capturing all the data, send it to somewhere remote, and then you can use that information that become the, new gold in this digital age. So I think that's something I thought was very important, and you guys helped to bring that. So with that in mind, then tell us what is the biggest challenge that you've seen, and I think that share from that challenge or success stories that you can share with our audience. So what are the things that can do better, or things they need to watch out for?
Well, probably at the beginning stage, what we find probably the most important part is a really good design into a system, and it's not something you can cut short. Because while you might save a week of the project by minimizing the design on doing something correctly, you'll spend 10 weeks on the back end trying to fix all those mistakes that you had in that design. So what we learned is that you have to look at it, make sure you understand the requirements, and then make sure you design that and take that, then you have to communicate that design to make sure everybody's aware of what you're trying to do. Because you have a lot of partners out there. It's not only the fixture makers, it's the people who are assembling the systems, but it's also the people installing it. So you have to spend a lot of good time making sure they're up to speed.
And that's, I mean, you kind of, it's every mistake that we've seen has spurred from something that has been led from the design to maybe underestimating the complexity of systems. And so, yes, even if you get a great design, which happens sometimes, once it gets on site, oftentimes another mistake is that we underestimate the need for commissioning. And so what ends up happening is whoever put the project together, whether it was a specifier, agent, or architect, or engineer, whoever it is that put this together, didn't quite understand the complexities of what was going to happen on site in order to deliver the real product. So the contractor didn't know how to bid it and figured, yeah, this is something that maybe, you know what, I'm just going to call the manufacturer. They're going to come out and do it, right? No, that's not how it works. So what ends up happening is you get out there and you maybe budgeted a couple $1,000s or something like that, and for a day, and it ends up being 2-3 weeks, and you have 5 people out there, and now the manufacturer's out there, and everybody's panicking because you have liquidated damages because the site was supposed to be open, a week ago, and that is a real issue of not truly appreciating the time and the complexity of making a system work. And if you understand that and you prep everybody and everybody knows, then it's fine, right? As long as you communicate it. But if you don't, it can be a lot of headaches.
Yeah, and I think you're talking about the technology. I think Signify, for example, this year we are very excited about the FlexTune system. Right, it's a FlexTune system, basically bring this tunable white into the office environment, healthcare, or education. And then it's new technology, we're excited, but as you said, it can be complicated, even though we have a pretty, I'll call it easy solution with the EasySense SNS, right? So still, I think that there are those who are maybe a little bit daunted by this technology, or they're used to the old way of working. So I think that we experienced it firsthand as well. We try to kind of lower the barrier. So with that in mind, what other kind of, I'll call it the lessons or guideposts that you can offer to the audience as they think about the next lighting project, things that to watch out for?
Yeah. Okay. Well, what I would say is that one of the big challenges that we all have is just how to get it into a building. From a sales perspective. So that's where it all starts. A salesman has a great idea or talks to a controls manufacturer, or these days it's kind of nice, the end user's actually asking for it, and that's helpful, right? I want advanced controls, I want wireless, I want to be Title 24 compliant, or whatever that is that they're trying to meet. And so you say, oh shoot, I gotta go do that now, and let me figure that out, and let me figure out all the different values that I need to generate. So translating that conversation back to the designers and back to the implementers, that becomes, there's a lot of gaps in there. There's a lot of playing the telephone game, right? I want this type of data, and before you know it, you're getting the opposite type of data, because that's what happens. So what we've noticed is in the sales process, the more people you can bring to the table that are parts of each one of the processes of implementation. So you bring the sales guy's in there, he's managing the relationship. But then there needs to be a designer in the room. There needs to be the commissioner or the implementer in the room. We end up getting brought to the table by the major controls manufacturers that are selling a control system so that they can tell them how the thing's going to get installed, because they're not installing it, right? And how's it going to actually get commissioned and
reading
support.
Instruction.
Yeah.
Go figure it out. Nobody reads that.
The book. So yeah.
Also, the industry's kind of changing. When we first got in, it was a fire and forget. You got the material, you shipped it to the site, it was done. You were all done on that. Then we morphed into a license. The industry went from in the control side to a license scenario where someone said, well, what are you going to have to pay annually for the thing I already bought last year? It didn't work, so the licenses became a real problem. Now we've gone to another stage, and we talk about all the applications and the support and the software. And now when you're saying we'll do an ongoing support for you and being able to, not only do we keep the licenses and maybe part of that, but it's really about the ongoing support that we give to that site to keep it running correctly. And that's kind of been a change, I would say, in the sales process too. 5 years ago, no one wanted to buy their Microsoft operating system at home every year. So that's not going to happen. I want to buy it once and I'm done. Now most of us are paying on a yearly basis for our Microsoft. The whole industry is changing in that regard from the control side.
And we hope that we can inspire the industry through maybe some case studies and some white papers about old systems that have been installed that haven't been serviced and what we can do to revitalize them, but also what could have been had they had someone in there supporting it. So yeah, I think a lot of the systems were sold in the early days as set it and forget it, and we all need to just realize that they aren't, and you do need to have some maintenance on them, and we can help with that.
So I want to kind of dive in a little more these two different scenarios, because for us, the lighting, you have either a retrofit, we have an Evo kit, and also we have the OEM that we'll work with their new fixtures for the new install. And then even for the retrofit, we have a company coming to Signify, say, hey, I want to put your our sensor into even a retrofit kit, right? So tell us a little bit more in terms of two different dynamic, new install versus retrofit, something interesting, insightful from your system integrator standpoint. Is there something unique?
Yeah, probably in the retrofit side, you always have to deal with the ROI word, which and that's always a challenge, because in today's environment, that return is much wider, much bigger, much more involved with. It's not just the savings. We talked about potentially changing some of your systems into revenue generating versus cost savings. So that revenue, that whole equation's upside down a little bit. So you have to be able to make sure you understand the full gains that you're going to get from whatever system that you develop. So that's probably on the retrofit side, is dealing with that equation.
And then, of course, new construction, completely opposite, right? I mean, rarely does energy savings come into the discussion. Title 24 compliance or ASHRAE come into it, but actually looking at what is the cost savings from this, and it should, and we try to engage the folks around that, but usually architects and lighting designers are just saying, look, we're just going to put LED in there. That's going to get us all the way. Or we're going to put some kind of advanced control. I don't know how it works, but it's going to be in there, and that's all we need to make sure of, right? And so delivering, it isn't that, just putting an advanced control system in gets you what you want. You have to make what you want out of that system. It's just like buying a phone that has no apps on it. If you want to get your bank statement, you have to download the app and log in and do all that kind of stuff. It doesn't do it until you do that. So on the new construction side, we have a bit of a gap between those that are specifying it, installing it, everything, and the ones that I think initially, if it was specified, if an end user, whoever it is, Google or Yahoo, or these folks that are kind of forward thinking and want advanced controls in their building, they'd say the decree, I want Daintree or Unlighted or whatever that is in my building, and then it happens. But somewhere in the middle, there wasn't somebody there to actually make what they were dreaming of happen. So it basically ends up looking just like an old BMS. So that's what happens in new construction. Retrofit, you got the ROI challenge, and of course, you have to be all over the design and understanding all the different values that you're generating. LEDs, 30-watt fixture, dimming that to 15 watts doesn't save you a lot of money. It may one day, utility rates raise every year, but today we need to do something other than just dim it and turn it off occasionally.
Okay, and then I think you mentioned something I want to kind of focus on, is that since you deal with the customers from the system integrator standpoint, do you feel that the kind of the audience that you need to influence to get their buy-in, has it changed, or is there any difference? How do you see that part of that sort of decision-making process? Because again, right, we're talking about OEM doing their thing, and then we as component manufacturers and provide a sub to the OEM. But to me, it's really what the connected lighting is about. You don't just have a facility manager. You may people say, hey, I want to be able to harness that digital assets, the information that can flow through. So how does that improve efficiencies and whatnot? So is there any sort of insight with kind of looking ahead, this is what the next phase in terms of the whole sort of, get everybody on the table, how that is evolving over time?
Well, I think one of the things that we've noticed is that our customers are becoming much more advanced in their requirements and their demands. My 86-year-old mom has a Nest thermostat where she turns it up all the time on her phone. She never turns it down.
But spoiled.
So people are getting to understand it. It's part of their lives. Their cars are connected. Their houses are connected. They expect their buildings to be connected. And so we're having customers come to us. We want to be able to do this. And that's the important part in any kind of selling process, is really talking to your customer. And he may say, I want LEDs, but in all reality, they want to do something else. And engaging with that customer and finding that out, it's surprising how much more they want out of their systems. And they're asking for, they may not say, I want an indoor positioning system to track my valuable assets in my building. But say, I sure as hell can't find that flux capacitor that's somewhere in my building. I need to find that today. So that's the kind of, when you have those discussions and you come up with, at least, as you said, put the foundation in there, the Xitanium driver being one of the best parts of that. Get the foundation in there so that your system can grow. You've said it often, Benjamin, you've got one shot now. You're changing from traditional lighting to LEDs. Do it right so that it can grow with you in the future. If you put LED tubes in, okay, in 5 years, you're pretty much done. There's not much else you can grow into that. So that's the kind of important part, having that, engaging with your customers, understanding their wants and needs, and try to convey that into a plan or a design that makes sense for them, not only today, but going into the future.
Building on that, one of the things that, we went back to bringing in a team to deal with an end user. I think the old sales model was a sales guy goes in and sells, a widget, right? And that's successful to a certain degree. We can't be experts in everything. I don't claim to be an expert in anything. You don't. We have our lane, but there's things that I don't know that I don't know. So with a platform like this, it's really important that if you actually want to leverage it, that you bring the people that know how to leverage it in. So there are so many partners, there's so many that we have, but there's so many folks out there that are developing software applications to work with through the APIs to access this data, to bring more to the table. So you go out, you research that, you find out who are the folks that are doing people counting or occupational productivity gains, and what maybe somebody's looking to create an app for a particular segment. Let me help them. Bring them to the table, and now we can have a much greater discussion where we say lighting is a foregone conclusion. You're gonna do that. That's what sets the network up. Let's talk about what we can do with that. If you can lead that way in the sale, you'll get a lot further than, I want to sell you a lighting retrofit project. Here's the payback. Oh, and I can add some stuff. And you're already too expensive to begin. Don't talk to me about adding anything. And then, of course, as a sales guy, you're gonna leave it off as soon as they say no the first time. But if you say you have problems you don't even know you can solve right now, and there's technology out there that's kind of begging to come in here and solve these problems for you, let's talk about those. And by the way, isn't it kind of cool that I'm going to be able to solve those and have it paid for by a utility rebate and the savings? That's pretty cool, right? And then you move on.
So what do you see the industries moving towards? What is going now versus what you would like it to be? If everything's work out the way that you see it should be, to be more effective and more frictionless. I think that's what the term I heard that before, more frictionless, because you have all the different barriers, the building owners, the contractors, people who do the commissioning. So there's all of the learning curve, all of the different steps they have to jump through, right? So give us a little bit more insight on that.
Well, let me start off by connectivity. I mean, to be able to have one device work with another device, I think Nest made an announcement recently where they're only going to close down their connectivity to other systems beyond just Google. That's backwards. That's going backwards. What we want to see is that more and more devices are more interconnected to be able to communicate with that system, and that system. It's the way our homes work with a lot of different devices. Our EcoBee thermostat communicates to our lighting, and that's the way I look at it. For us to succeed in this industry, we can't create silos. We have to create a pretty robust, open, competitive. It's always good for the customers at the end of the day. A lot of different good systems that either have the best features or the best cost, whatever they're best at. they can really play that angle and use that and leverage it to make a successful business model for themselves. That's the connectivity is what I'm focusing on. I think that's probably the most important part to make it into the next level.
No doubt. And right now we're vetting out how you actually work with these systems. APIs are all very young and early on. Every manufacturer says they have them, but do they actually have them available for full interaction? Are they two-way? Can I control, or is it just read? Those types of things need to get vetted out. And so I envision one day all the APIs are just set. You can interact with these systems. You can write your own user interfaces, and that will pull the controls manufacturers out of the need to be user interface writers, and it will actually separate those out. One, you can either write some amazing user interfaces for applications that you want to use these networks for, or you can be really good at creating a network that many different devices that can connect on, like you were saying. So those, and I think, I came from Daintree, so we were preaching interoperability and open standards for years, and I think my perception back then was it was an either or. So you're either open or you're closed, proprietary, right? I don't think that's necessarily the case today, and we're seeing some manufacturers who are saying, I can't write it to the standard, because the standard really isn't made for what I'm trying to accomplish. There's things that I need to do to change it. Otherwise, it's going to get too nutty, and I can't control how everybody else is going to do their stuff. However, I can write my proprietary firmware for what I need to do, but I can still use the technology, the Bluetooth or the Zigbee, to enable others to hop on my network. And just because their stack's a little bit different, we're going to enable them to play on the network, and you can, through our API, access them and do whatever you want. So let's actually create a standard network that, yes, other folks might do some interesting things in their firmware that don't really help them work together, but they're necessary, right? So I do believe, and once that can happen where it needs to be interoperable, we can't put a system in that only sensors from one company work on that network. That's death to the building.
Right, because I think the one thing I realized, and many of you I'm sure that you recognize, is that a lot of times a building may have different phases of retrofit, lobby first, and then offices later, and then different light fixtures, right? And then you have different tenant move in, do the all of that stuff. So just expecting that you have the monopoly of an entire building or entire floor is a little bit wishful thinking, and that's the reason why, like through the SR interface on Signify, for example, we have a slew of a company who want to work with us, and even those who had a proprietary system before, they recognize the simplicity of the two-wire solution, open D4I, the DALI for IoT, for example, the ANSYS and the DIIA. With the Signify being a global company, we kind of rally around the industry to taking the charge, say, hey, we need to embrace that openness. And that openness obviously foster innovation and more competition, and then end customer benefit as a result of that.
Honestly, that's why we're here. And to give you a plug, we've been working together for the last year and trying to help get you into this market. Anyone that's supporting standards and interoperability and not trying to own the entire segment. So Robert and I always, we're going to put this in other people's fixtures, right? It's not all going to be Signify, Philips. Yeah, absolutely. If you don't, Philips can't be the only company that provides fixtures with our sensors. That'll never work, right? So we understand that we kind of got to section off our needs and our wants, and that the Philips agent that wants to sell all the fixtures is going to be super happy that you're promoting it with but that's okay, right? Otherwise, this industry just won't succeed. So we really appreciate that you're doing that. It's very unselfish, but it's very long-term, and I think that's how we want to play with partners that are thinking long-term and not just about how much I can sell today.
I think the result of that, the Xitanium drivers, it's interesting. I hear a reference that this so-and-so fixture has a Xitanium driver. I'm thinking, well, the Philips driver. No, it's the Xitanium driver. And I'm thinking, okay, yeah, we'll go with that Xitanium driver. That's a good company. And it's becoming, I think, your strategy, it's kind of a stealth strategy. We can't own it all, but guess what? We have a good infrastructure that's going to own it all. So it helps us a lot having that. And as I said, we've had people reference it not knowing or not really realizing it was part of your portfolio.
And then if you stop by the Signify booth, you hear that lighting is the new language. right? I think that's very true. The language and communicating, and to make that language common, we have to kind of let everybody know how to speak the language. So I think that that's really the digital foundation. You really have to start with that building block first of all. So with that, and I'm going to ask you the other question is that from a lighting industry standpoint, with Signify being its unique global perspective in a leadership position, is there something that we can do to help to further advance these, connect it as a mainstream, right? I'm sure that I use the terminology of Wild West. There's so many different solutions. There's so many different players. Everybody want to get in there and make money out of it. But like you said, Benjamin, it's about the long view. How do we really help our customer make it easier, right? So is there some advice they can offer to us so that we can bring it back to the colleague in the U.S. as well as in the headquarters? This is what we need to do to really drive it forward.
Yeah, and I am gonna put that on you.
Okay.
Because that's your job. I am going to help you because if you get in front of the right people, which is the end user, you understand what their needs are, we can stop approaching the industry from a hardware perspective where we say, well, everyone's making sensors, I'm just gonna make another sensor, just smaller, cheaper, lighter, better, with more widgets in it. Versus going and finding out why people are using these sensors and what's valuable to them, and then making something that actually solves a problem or fills a void in the marketplace. And so, again, this is getting in front of those that need it and understanding their needs. We need to start listening to the marketplace. This market has been just rife with fixture manufacturers that just make something 1 watt more efficient or 1% more efficient or whatever it is, or that it was edge lit and now it's thinner and edge lit or whatever it is. We just keep it still isn't asking the customer what do you need, because they didn't need to, because that was about a lighting designer designing a space really nice, and that's what they're hired to do. Now we need to talk to the end user. I don't think the lighting industry has spent a lot of time talking to an end user. So the controls guys do, because they're delivering these solutions. But even still, they're still looking around Lightfair and saying, oh, he's doing that? Oh man, we better do that. Really? Well, why? You don't know that there's an actual value for that. He may have just seen somebody else and he's copying him. So what I want you to do is get with me, get in front of the end users, listen to what the needs are, and let's create something that's going to actually change the game. And work with the software programmers that say, I want to create an app to do this, but there's no sensor out there that's collecting that data. Perfect. And then we go and we do that.
I'd say stop looking up all the time. You look at lights all the time, but when you go into a manufacturing site, it's the drives, it's the compressors, there's other parts of that building that uses a lot more energy than the lighting. And that's what they're looking at. Solve my problem that I can have is a one control system that controls all my different systems so I know what's going on and going off at a time. There's ways to save money there. So I say if you're looking holistically at the building versus just one aspect of it, you'll be surprised how much more you can achieve or help your customer in that regard.
One thing I want to maybe differ from you, Benjamin, in terms of talking to the end customers. I'm sure that all of our OEM customers do talk to end customers, but I think that picking up what you said earlier is that the end customer has a different constituents. So they may be talking to one group, but now you have more people have vested interest. They all want to come in. It could be the CTO, a CIO. Other people say, hey, we can do this now. And they may not be the normal point of contact for the OEM, because some of the big guys, they have a control group, sure, they know who to talk to, knock on the right door. But the smaller guy, they only talk to the facility manager or people who buy, so you have the more diversity in terms of stakeholders, because IoT really break down the wall. And people realize the benefit. And like you said, your grandmother or your mother or other relative who's using a Nest, using a smartphone, we're kind of pampered with that advance in the consumer electronic, and now they're expecting the same at work.
Yep. And you asked that before, and I know you asked it again because we didn't really answer it, so that's good. I appreciate that. You got to talk to the CEO, because he's got the greater vision of the whole company, and he wants to see things that he wasn't seeing. So you need him, and then he can point you in the right direction. The next person is the IT department, and nobody wants to talk to the IT department. Okay? I
You
don't
get
like
into
it.
trouble taking when
Yeah.
your laptop doesn't
I
work,
don't
right?
like it. It's not fun. Okay, they don't like me, and I
First,
try.
security, okay.
Yeah,
How
right.
robust it can be.
What are you
right?
going to do to my network? But no, IT departments these days, these guys are really smart. They went to school a long time to study networks, and they're not just studying how I put fiber in my building anymore. They are looking at IoT solutions. They're back there digging up solutions. They're researching. They will help guide you to what's happening in that building and to ways that they'll allow access and will want to work with you. So IT folks, really important. CIO, good person to be involved in that discussion. COO, somebody that's really interested in optimizing the operations of the building. And so here's some data that we could use to do that. So unfortunately, it's a lot of C-suite because when we were dealing with a lighting retrofit, it was facilities manager. It was a really easy person to talk to. It was nice. We went in jeans and a t-shirt and we all, were
No PowerPoint required.
no power, better not, So yeah, now it's unfortunately there's 5 gatekeepers in front of the person that you really need to talk to, and that's why that's why the big folks have had more success than the little ones because GE or Acuity or those can walk in and say, hey, I'm GE, by the way. We funded your company through GE Capital. You might want to hear me out, right? So that type of stuff is getting them to the right people. Whereas me walking out there, I'm SBT. Yeah, get in line, right? So that is a more challenging. That the industry it has a big challenge there, especially if you're a contractor and you want to sell a solution. You have to fight your way up to the right spot. But you know what? Start at the facilities manager and tell them what you're trying to do. And a lot of times they'll fight to get you up there because from what we found, they'll get promoted from something like this, right? Or they'll get a lot of praise because this was outside the box thinking and it impacted a lot of other departments other than just their budget, and so it can benefit them.
Okay. So one thing, maybe I'm going to turn it to the audience with a question. So will you tell me a little bit about like a futuristic, one of the most futuristic use case that you have seen? Because I think I want to put us in the shoes of end customers, something that kind of stick in your mind. And
You can't name names, but I know who you want to talk about. No. Yeah. Okay. All right. There's a large national small box retail project that we're working on right now, but it is I'd say it's the most complex IoT project or deployment that anyone's ever done in the industry. To date, it's using every possible IoT edge device that you can dream of, and including lighting, but lighting isn't driving the real value prop. So like we all talk about, lighting puts the network in place, but we're using smart thermostats, and that's good, and that's solving all sorts of problems when you have 1,000 or 2,000 or 10,000 sites across the country. That visibility into each site and what's going on is game changing, right? We're seeing, as soon, and a lot of people in this industry that have tried to do that have, the instant you hit the on button, 4,000 alerts pop up because half of these systems were on their way out anyways, right? So you have to deal with that, and there's analytics to help with that. But then getting even deeper into the edge and using temp sensors and humidity sensors and finding out what the temperature is outside and doing some analytics on how you can manage that, and having that from a macro view really helps. And then going into water detection and leak detection and water flow and managing the irrigation system and putting leak detection in critical areas like around the water heaters and stuff like that. All of it, cost savings, great data, just the T-stat portion of the ability to not have to send a tech out onto site just because somebody called and said it was too hot. The ability to log into a computer and see what's going on and say, well, the thermostat's set to 80, so that's why it's too hot. And I didn't have to pay $500 to find that out, to send a tech out. I can lower the temperature because maybe somebody was cold. Maybe your mother was at the site playing with the thermostat.
To expand on that one, so our customer there, and we didn't realize, we thought it was the person who owns the small box retail. It's not. It's not our customer. That was the most game changing. Is the person who's actually servicing the site. We have to make their lives easier and more efficient. And then if they're happy, that means that the end customer truly was happy. So we're giving them diagnostic information to know that maybe we're short cycling an air conditioning system every 5 minutes or 10 minutes. It's fine now because it's a nice temperature, but in 6 months that system's going to fail. So we're giving this early warning system so they can get in there and fix some things before it fails. So we're giving them preemptive diagnostics. It's a game changer, really. They're the first ones I think out there doing this type of level of control on everything. And there's some parts that are difficult to work with, but I think when they're finished, they're going to get a very robust system to be able to take advantage of things that you talk about. Outside temperature. Outside temperature just is spiking up. It's a really hot day in the summertime. Let's get those air conditioners pumped at a lower level instead of at max temperature 72, drop it down to 70 because we're going to be fighting that 90, 95, or 100 degree temperature later on that day. So there's ways to do this that allows them to be, that's the IoT world, to be able to use the data that you're already collecting into an intelligent way. To me, this is a game changer. We're not done with it yet, but and it's a challenge, but we're starting to see the effects of it right now.
Now, what about those who are on the fence? Because this is what you said is really the cutting edge, right? It's just like, wow, okay, that's the future. At the same time, there are those who's like, I don't need all of that. Just give me something cheap and simple, and that's all I need. So, are there any sort of advice, anything that you ask, hey, this is what you should think of from your perspective, Benjamin? You could talk to a lot of them already. Those who are very advanced, and also those who say, I just want to keep it simple.
Again, Benjamin said not to name names. I'm not going to name that person, but he told us that advanced controls was a waste of time. What are you doing that? I'm in the retrofit world. It's all about the lowest cost option to get into that. He said that here yesterday. I'm like, wow. Where have you been? The T12's calling your name, looking for you. So it got back to what I was saying. We really have to define what that return is. He was only on return on investment. It was only 2 years, and that means a tube world. And he was only looking strictly at energy savings. You have to really start educating folks about what that return can actually mean. We've got some ideas that were game changer. We talked about some other options where it's going to be revenue generating, where it allows you to have maybe your salespeople more efficient at a particular site. That's a return. That's in the top part of that equation over the investment. And that's the part we have to try to do.
And I think that's might be kind of hard to capture that, right? Or quantify it, though,
correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Quantify benefit. I mean, we hear that all the time. It's like they can see the quantified benefit in terms of energy saving, but when you get into something more advanced that you intuitively know is there, but when we're trying to quantify, I think that's where the whole lighting industry right now is still kind of caught in this situation. We don't have a lot of use cases for that. If you do, maybe it's not like very well known because everybody want to keep it to themselves. Would you say that's the case?
No, I'm going to argue with you on that.
Okay, let's do it.
Because what you're referring to is when we hadn't actually figured out what the benefit was. So you can't quantify what you don't know what the benefit is. So we have a network that provides a bunch of data, and we run in there and say, isn't this data great? You're going to be able to do stuff with it. They say, yeah, but what? And how can I quantify that? Now we've actually figured out what to do with that data. And now we can present that to the right person in the company, and he can actually come back, or she, and can tell us, that means this to my organization, and I can quantify that for you. But if you don't talk to the right person, they have no idea. So that means get the entire leadership team of the company in place, because I'm going to be talking to you for this, and you for this, and you for this, and I need your help because I don't know what it costs you, but you can tell me, right? I hope you can. If not, maybe you got a bigger problem. So that, I think, is being vetted out. So I am no longer going and selling a pipe dream. I used to, all right? We had data. And some people loved the concept, and they were the early adopters, and they were great. Now we actually know what we can do with it, and I think we can quantify those benefits. If you haven't figured that out yet, come talk to us. We'll help you, because really that's what we spend all our time trying to figure out. I can't sell vaporware anymore. You need something tangible, right? So.
Okay. So just kind of wrap it up, I would like to ask each of you kind of one advice, one key takeaway you want our audience to think about or to, to incorporate into the mind instead of the connected lighting. Something that you feel that this is your gift to our audiences here in the room and also those who will be watching online.
Before I did, there was a part of that question that I wanted to answer, and I think it's important. I want to say it.
Please do.
Advanced controls and wireless networks aren't for everyone, plain and simple. Okay. There are plenty of customers that, looking at their business model now, as a CEO and everything, and I see my company from the top down, and there's all sorts of things. I'm like, yeah, that would be wonderful to do, but I can't do that, right? I have this budget or this plan or this strategy, and advanced controls don't fit into that. I'm sorry, right? And from our standpoint, we're like, everyone needs it. It's the greatest thing in the world. Look at all the benefits. Look at what we can do for you. No, guess what? I'm selling my business next year, and I need to cut costs, and that's it. And I'm not interested in putting advanced controls in. Oh, that's an inch, but we can still do business, right? So I think that there's ways to get things like the SNS 200 or other type of local solutions in place that can be low enough cost or can get the ROI to a point where it can fit inside of that 1 year window that they need in order to sell the company. Look, I'm not talking to somebody that's thinking 10 years down the road, they're thinking 1 year down the road. And unless I'm talking to somebody that's got a long-term vision and they want to grow their operations around their network, then that conversation's gonna die really quick. And that comes back to listening to what your customer is asking for. If you're telling them to tell you what to spec, that's a problem. They don't know, right? And that happens a lot. My customer told me spec this. I'm like, what? Please, I appreciate that, but come on, give them some guidance here. But then on the other side, my customer told me this was my business model and that they can't handle advanced control. And say, okay, well, let's start to shave some things away, some complexities and some costs, and let's find a solution that will solve their problem. So I don't want to let anybody think that we're under some kind of notion that you can go sell advanced controls to everybody, because you just can't. So that was one thing. The grain of something that I could leave with the audience, I would say, and I've been saying this for a while now, if you want to sell advanced controls, you have to lead with advanced controls. If you want to sell LED, then you need to lead with LED. If you get lucky and get something to tag onto the backside of the LED, then great, but you got lucky. If you lead with advanced controls, you will sell LED because they go together right now. So if you want both, lead with the value that you're going to get from this network you're putting in, and you'll pull the LED with you, and I think you'll have a much more successful interaction. You got to get to the right people, but you'll definitely feel more fulfilled because you aren't just. I think most of us in this industry are tired of having that same conversation. I saved you a watt, and here's your payback, and here's your rebate, and here's the da-da-da-da-da. This is much more fulfilling. You're bringing something really neat that most people haven't brought to them, and you're having a dialogue that's open-ended, and we're dreaming, and we're thinking, and we're inspiring, we're bringing partners to the table, and it's just a much more fulfilling sales process. And I hope that more people start engaging in that.
And I hear from the other panelists, they talk about imagination. I think that really the IoT really opened up that imagination. You have technology here available today that they may not know of. Signify bringing a lot of new technology. You mentioned the SNS 200, we have 210 coming out, for example, right? So there are a lot of new innovation. It's like we know, but they have to use your imagination, figure out what these technology help to address the problem. So, Rich, what's your thought?
I've been coming to life here for 20 years now, and one of just take a snapshot from 20 years ago to today. It was a big Sylvania booth, a big GE booth, a big Philips booth, and a big Lithonia, not Acuity back then, booth. And you look out there today, it's completely different now. All three of the major lighting companies have gone through major transformations. Other companies, some of the big fixture companies are as well too. And so that tells me that we're evolving as an industry, very much evolving as an industry. So the set patterns, the set methods, the set processes that we've had in the past are not going to work going forward because we have such a different dynamic that we have today. So as you're developing products and you're going to market, looking backwards is probably going to give you you're going to fail going in the way, which means you have to have some new. That doesn't mean everything that you've done is wrong. That's absolutely not true. It's just that looking forward, taking what you've done well and trying to understand where the market's going, how you get to market, how do you get your systems. You know, in 20 years, maybe Signify becomes a full-blown software company versus a hardware. You know, it's keeping that mindset open about where those directions and avenues make sense. That's what's just keep that direction open-minded.
Great, thank you. Just like I said at the beginning of today's panel session, every time I hear from you and also now Rich, I feel that I learned so much. I hope that all of you in the audience feel the same way as well. So I do want to thank you very, very much for coming by, especially on the last day of Life Fair. I'm sure you all bodies are kind of weary, you want to go home. So with that said, I want to thank you very much, and I'd like to turn it to the audience if anybody have any question. Let me give you the
You
mic.
nailed it. You sign with ROI at the moment. That's the way that you get in. So there are two questions I have about that. And I work within lighting, but only we write about it. And we're always seeking those examples. So for example, when we talk about offices and businesses, and we're selling connected lighting, we have the same old things that we pull out every time, which is, you know, cost of the dimming, which you've just said really doesn't save them very much. Really good to know. Then we talk about meeting rooms and how you can, you know, find out through a central system if they're available or not. We have things like, you know, predictive maintenance potentially in some areas, although that's not a very strong suite, and we don't have any examples or many examples about that. We're always looking for ways to write about it in a more innovative way without scrabbling around the internet and finding, you know, some great examples around the world, which we put in or copy, but then it, you know, it gets taken out. Everybody says we can't do that, we can't do that. So we end up with this sort of set of 4 things for a business, for example, for an office who's going to transform the whole system, which in the end you think there's not a very powerful value proposition here. And if I was the CEO, I'm not so sure if we can't prove anything apart from the saving of energy. And we don't usually talk about it in a financial term, we talk about it in a percentage, because I think it's probably, as you said, fairly minimal. So can you, when you said there are so many examples of innovative solutions out there, I'd love to hear more about some of them, maybe even just for, you know, for businesses and offices or something like that. Maybe talk to you afterwards.
Absolutely. I mean, just the easiest example I always try to give is on the manufacturing side. When I said look down and up when you're in that site, because there's so much more that you can build into that, using the lighting as the backbone of being able to do, if you want to just go strictly energy savings, because there's a lot of other things you can do. There's a lot more energy in a compressor than is the lighting any day of the week. So those are easy ones, and you can morph into some of the other less hard cost savings that you talked about, the conference room management. But if you start getting into the tracking of expensive items, and that becomes more valuable too as well. So yeah, we've got examples that we're putting together, we're actually implementing now, so we can absolutely talk to.
CEOs, do they generally know what they want, or do you think they'd be more informed?
No, not about technology, but they know what their business needs.
Yeah.
And since we're not really having a technology discussion, we're having a solution to your problem discussion. I won't even mention technology to CEO. I just want to know how their business runs and where the gaps are in data and what would be valuable to him. So it's much more listening to him than telling him. I certainly don't go in with a PowerPoint showing him a sensor, right? That's the last thing I'm going to do with a CEO.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for coming out today. We talk about education and you know, informing the OEM. So if you're an OEM, how do you educate your clientele and your target market? Like what are some pieces of advice that you can give to, you know, help educate?
When you say OEM, do you mean a lighting manufacturer?
Yeah, if you're a lighting
Maybe a lighting
manufacturer, or a
manufacturer.
controls manufacturer, you know, you need to get out there and you need to educate, you know, the contractors or, you know, your clients as an OEM. You know, what's an effective way to do that, and how do you partner?
Well, I say that, you know, one thing we do and just try to do is really show the fact that we're working with OEM, and we have subject matter expert. We constantly talk to them, not just about a product, but also in terms of direction, what the industry is moving towards through the standard bodies. right? So Signify has a lot of people working with the standards group. So we use that information to educate, because I think that education, I hear that being mentioned before. At this stage, there's so many new things coming in. If you're a lighting designer, you probably feel overwhelmed. Oh, here's another Bluetooth and Zigbee, alphabet soup, right? Even D4I, I heard that first time, so oh please, there's another acronym. So it's education. So we have people who are very well trained. Some of those are sitting in this room to tell them, hey, this is what we have offered, because technology continues to evolve. And I think the lighting industry really started to step up the pace, because you say advanced control, LED, digitization, really bringing a lot of new ideas, new players as well, right? So with Signify, we're working with different partners, so we get that information up front, and we become the focal point of making that information spread through our partners or OEM, who then bring it to their end customers. So it's part of the education process to build awareness, but also build trust, so they can trust us in return, knowing that we are steering them in the right direction, because we're taking that open approach. We're not trying to proprietize it, but rather want to make sure it's an open system.
So I've definitely done a fair amount of work with OEM fixture manufacturers and controls manufacturers. The fixture manufacturer will, most of them, other than a few of the top ones, but most of them will tell you the same thing. My customer is the specifier or the agent, and until they tell me I need something with Enlighted or Daintree or whatever, that's where I end, right? So as long as I have it on my catalog that I can put these different controls in, they're the ones who are going to tell me. So the OEM, the fixture manufacturer, isn't going to go out and preach IoT. It's not, even if they want to. I think some have tried. At the end of the day, that's not their target customer. What I would like to see happen is, so you go up chain and you have that specifier up there. I would like the specifier to start thinking more IoT. I would like the specifier to begin looking beyond the lighting system and the end result of the light out of the fixture, and more around what's available. The alphabet soup is challenging, right? I mean, if I didn't know what I know and I walked through the controls area of LightFair, it would have just become a blur. One guy's Bluetooth low energy, another one's Bluetooth mesh, and one's proprietary, one's to the standard. What in the heck is going on? I mean, what do these even do? And everybody seems like they do the same thing, but they don't. And you'd have to really know the system to understand that. So for a lighting specifier to walk in who's been trained in lighting, knows more about lighting than I'll ever know about lighting, and to expect them just to say, now you need to understand everything about what IoT can bring to a space, I don't know that that's the solution. So that's kind of what SBT is trying to do, is let's come alongside the specifier and say, well, when you're specifying that, let me help you make sure that you're not just putting in another LED system with dumb controls, right? I don't like to use dumb, isolated, whatever you want to call it, but let's put in a local, let's put in a network solution, and let me help you build some value. I actually know that customer, and maybe I can even talk to them before to get them to leverage this network. So it needs folks in the industry to start engaging people that up to today have had no interest in talking about IoT. They'll come to the show and they'll take home pamphlets, but when it comes to designing a system, it's not going to happen, right?